Hey guys, I just received this inlay from DePaule Supply at luthiersupply.com. They are basically a pearl inlay supply house, and they have a ridiculous variety of inlays that you can purchase for very cheap. And so one of my students in an upcoming class picked out this pretty cool looking moon with a wolf silhouetted against it inlay. And in preparation for the class, I'm going to install this inlay onto his head plate so that then when he glues the head plate down, he'll have that wolf inlay right there on the headstock. Now, one point I just want to make for the new flourishing inlay artist out there, and that's that these these pearl inlay supply houses have a lot of the simple inlays that people generally want. So in a lot of cases, it doesn't really make sense to make a custom inlay if that inlay already exists online from one of these supply houses, because it's just going to be a hell of a lot of extra work to make this inlay, and they have a process for, you know, batching out these very popular common symbols and themes. So animal themed inlays are very popular, for example. So this video is going to be all about really the simplest form of inlay work, which is buying a pre-made inlay and installing it onto your guitar. And in this case, it's an especially simplified inlay because it's round. So as you're about to see, installing a pretty much circular inlay is a lot easier than installing any other shape. Alright, so first things first, let's get this thing out of its plastic wrapping, and as per the instructions for this particular company, they want us to place the cardboard and the inlay in some warm water, which just loosens up the bond between the cardboard and the inlay itself based on whatever glue they chose to use to stick it on there. Now, there are some very fine pieces of pearl around the legs of the dog, and so I really want to be careful not to lose these itty-bitty pieces. So I just need the main round portion of the inlay for now. The really small, fine pieces around the legs I'm just going to put away for safekeeping. And what I'm doing now is lining up my inlay on a center line that I've drawn on my head plate here. And there's a couple things. Every headstock is going to look a little bit different, but there's a couple things you want to avoid. One, I don't want this inlay to end up too close to the edge of the headstock. That doesn't look right. And also, I want to be aware of where my tuner holes are going to be and how large the washers for my tuners are, because I also don't want those to get too close to the inlay. Again, just because it doesn't look right. Especially if, say, for example, your washers are actually covering over the inlay a little bit. Then it really interferes with the aesthetic of it. And so now I simply mark out the place where I want to drill and punch out that mark with an awl. Before I drill for the real thing, it's a good idea to do a test cut in some scrap wood. That way you can place the pearl in there and just make absolutely sure that the diameter of the Forstner bit that you're using matches the inlay piece perfectly. And now I'm ready for the real cut. Marking my center point here deeply with an awl just guarantees that the brad point of my Forstner bit will find that center location. And I'm stopping to check my depth here. I'm not really striving for any particular depth. I just need it to be deep enough that I know that that pearl will be firmly embedded in there, and I'm not going to sand through it later. Of course, I want it to sit just a little bit proud of the surface so it can be sanded back to flush. For this inlay, I'll be using a black medium thick super glue by Starbond. This allows me to not only set the inlay in place, but also to backfill the wolf silhouette portion of the inlay with that medium thick glue and get a deep black color. And so first I place some packaging tape behind where I'll be working just to protect that surface, because the brad point of the Forstner bit leaves a hole in my head plate, and if I just ignore that, the super glue will come seeping out of that hole and stick my workpiece right to the workbench. Not good. So at first I'm placing just enough glue in here to hold the piece in place and for it to sort of gap fill around the edges. And then I'm going to clamp this piece of acrylic. There's paste wax on the piece of acrylic just so it doesn't stick. And that's just to keep everything nice and flat and firmly placed against the bottom of the Forstner bit hole there. After just a couple of minutes, I can remove the clamp. Now the interesting, intricate detail work begins, where I kind of fumble around with these little leg pieces. That really skinny piece on the left is going to be particularly fussy, as you'll see when it comes to getting that perfectly located and held down with the glue. Because it's so thin, it tends to want to just kind of fall over and swim around in the glue. And now I add a whip tip to my glue bottle here just for maximum precision. As I glue each piece here one at a time, I hold it in place with my pen knife for about 2 minutes to let the glue cure enough to set and hold its position before I move on to the next piece. Everything's in fast motion here, so it appears like I'm holding it for a shorter amount of time, but I'm actually holding it for about 2 minutes. Now you could actually use accelerator here, but you want to be careful with how you use it in a tight situation like this, because you don't want the accelerator to affect the other pieces down the line, and also you don't want to flood the inlay with accelerator, which would cause the accelerator to bloom and fill the pocket that you're trying to get to look black with this nasty white superglue bloom. Now this last piece, because it is taller than it is wide, it really wants to swim around and to fall over. So there's a lot of fiddling here to get this one right, and ultimately, as you'll see, I use the accelerator since all the other ones down the line are already locked in place. I'm not worried about them, and I can give it a little spray on this. Even if it blooms a little bit, that's alright, because I'm going to fill in the glue over top of it. And now the fun part, to fill in the silhouette of the wolf. In most situations, superglue dries very quickly. However, in this case, since we're just globbing it on, it's going to take a lot longer. So you really want to let this sit at least overnight before you sand it back. Alright, and there we have it. Cool little wolf silhouetted against the moon. Mother of pearl inlay, and it's in that nice gold mother of pearl, which isn't a different species of MOP. It's really just as you progress through the layers of the shell, you'll have more gold-like sections, and you'll have more white sections, and even some greens and other things like that. And so when they market these as gold mother of pearl, white mother of pearl, etc., they're really just telling you that the section of mother of pearl has more of one color than the other. And actually, if you sand through this enough, you'll enter another layer, and you could end up purchasing a gold mother of pearl inlay, but then you end up, as you sand it flush, you end up with white or something else. So it's kind of the risk you take. Anyway, let's put a little mineral spirits on here just to see that pop. Okay, that looks great. The blacks are really well defined, and the mother of pearl, of course, just sparkles. Now, one thing that you didn't see when I was filling this with this stuff is, remember that hole from the brad point that's in the back here? When I first started filling this with the glue, at one point I picked it up and just gave it a quick spray on the bottom, and what that does is, spraying it with the accelerator on the bottom plugs up that hole, so that otherwise it would just keep flushing out and down through that hole and onto my workbench. But if you early on put a little glue in there and then just give it a spray on the bottom, you don't want to tilt it because the glue will start to run off the side, but you just lift it up like that, and with the accelerator just give a little squirt on the bottom, and that hole will plug itself right up, and it'll also help to start to catalyze the glue from beneath. And now I'm going to put my center line back onto this. One thing I did in the beginning is I pulled that center line that I had because I knew it was going to sand away. I pulled it onto both ends here, so now all I have to do is pull it back onto the top, like that, and like that, and then connect it. And then I can even place my template back on here and redraw the headstock shape. And I'm using gel pen here just because it shows up much better on these dark woods. Much preferred over just using pencil. Alright, and now this head plate is ready for the student when class begins. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video every Friday. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.